Watch this.
It's good to have options in a restaurant or in an election. But what if you had more options for an election? Open primaries and ranked choice voting could soon be decided by Idaho voters. More Indigenous people go missing in Idaho than any other. A Boise State study that showed the stark reality is now being used to make a change by the University of Idaho. April showers and May flowers. A lot of one leads to a lot of the other, which is what we're starting to see across Idaho, from the foothills to the prairies. And we're taking you there today by taking you back to another Exploring Idaho. At the GOP convention last summer, delegates passed several, 6 to be exact, 6 rules and regulations, or resolutions, I should say, about elections. Everything from securing them by promoting only in-person election day voting to making them all partisan because Boise City Council once offered support for gun control, and since we all already know a candidate's politics anyway, let's make them partisan. To remove the use of student IDs as a way of participating in them, which they actually did this past legislative session. So 3 of those rules and resolutions were about crossover voting, where people register as a Republican just to take part in their closed primary election, an exclusivity the GOP set up back in 2012. 2 resolutions claimed crossover voting has become a problem and there's a need to preserve the Republican brand, because if they don't, they said, the GOP won't survive the next 10 years. And if you need to dilute the primary of another party, well, you're admitting your ideas suck. Your ideas won't stand on their own in this state. And not only do your ideas suck, but you're also a hypocrite for encouraging others to cross over. That's what they said. Preserving, diluting, surviving, interesting choice of words there. So they made a rule that made it so only in order to vote in the GOP primary, you have been unaffiliated for a year ahead of that primary. You also could not have voted for a non-GOP candidate, registered as anything but Republican, or donated to any other party for 2 years prior to a primary. Well, then came the legislative session, and the GOP chair, Dorothy Moon, laid out the party's priorities for the year.
So we've got to make sure our voices are heard within this building that we do not want ranked choice voting.
Chair Moon then explained why in an op-ed piece later that month, calling ranked choice voting a silly idea, saying it complicates the process, it's confusing and cumbersome for voters, and it removes the, quote, one with the most votes wins structure, writing, in a ranked choice voting election, the candidate that wins may not be the candidate you want, but the candidate the majority can live with. A month later, a bill to ban ranked choice voting in Idaho was introduced in the House State Affairs Committee.
This is a voting system that's being spread around the country, I would say a little like a virus. It's destabilizing people's normal voting abilities, and it's, according to the people in some of these states, very harmful. Alaska has it, Maine has it, 11 counties in California are using it.
Another interesting choice of words, spreading around the country like a virus. Well, according to fairvote.org, as of last month, there were just 63 jurisdictions in the entire United States who use ranked choice voting. 2 states, 3 counties, and 58 cities. So 11 counties in California? No, there's just 6 cities in California that do that. But anyway, that bill advanced to the House floor, where it passed along party lines in both chambers and was signed into law by the governor a month after that, on March 24th. So Idaho now has a ban on ranked choice voting, which will go into effect this July. But for how long that lasts, well, that could change, because this is where these roads of crossover voting and ranked choice voting converge. Today, a coalition, yes, another one, are launching a campaign asking Idahoans how they want to vote. Here's Joe Paris.
A coalition of Idahoans say they want to change the way Idaho votes.
I think it's a badly needed policy to sort of bring some normalcy back to Idaho politics.
Todd Achilles is a member of the Idaho Task Force of Veterans for Political Innovation, one of the groups that is a part of Idahoans for Open Primaries, an effort to end Idaho's closed primary system. The coalition is launching a signature campaign to qualify a ballot initiative for the November 2024 general election. The idea they are pitching to Idaho, a top 4 nonpartisan primary election. All candidates, regardless of party, would participate in a single primary election. The top 4 vote getters would then advance to the general election. From there, the general election would go into an instant runoff, also called ranked choice voting in other places. Voters pick their top candidate and then rank remaining candidates in order of their preference. 2, 3, 4, you get the idea. And if no candidate wins with more than 50% of the vote after all the first choice rankings are tallied, then the candidate in last place is eliminated from the vote, and each vote that candidate got is then transferred to a voter's second choice candidate. That process goes on until at least one candidate gets over 50% of the vote, and they are then declared the winner.
Why do you and your group think this is a good time to do this? And I guess what's the motivation behind this campaign?
Well, listen, since the primaries were closed by the Republican Party in 2011, let's just say Idaho politics have not improved. And I hear this from my Republican friends, my independent friends, my Democrat friends. Everybody's frustrated by sort of this slow decline in Idaho politics and this rise of extremist factions. And I think the basis in this is it used to be you get elected by bringing people together. Now, because of closed primaries, you get elected by being divisive, by having sort of that narrowest base. And that's the core of the problem.
Of major note, Idaho lawmakers passed and Governor Little signed a law this year to ban implementation of ranked choice voting. The Idahoans for Open Primaries Coalition is fully aware of heavy pushback on the idea from Republican lawmakers and Idaho GOP leaders. Those critics of the idea say that ranked choice voting and open primaries, it convolutes the current process.
Yeah, well, the arsonist doesn't like funding the fire department. So I think what you'll hear is those that have benefited from closed primaries are going to be the ones that will be most vocal in terms of pushing back against this initiative.
Resistance to American systems like voting changing is not new, and Achilles says that history shows that examining those systems for change has an impressive track record.
The 17th Amendment allowed us to directly elect senators. The 19th Amendment was women's allowed to vote, right? I mean, that was sort of a big issue for this country that women weren't allowed to vote until 1920. We had the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I mean, there's so many examples in the history of this country where we've said the system's not working as well as it should. We need to make some changes.
So as always here in the media, we say, Idahoans could soon be voting on this. What does that actually look like? Well, this is the goal is to have this on the November 2024 ballot. And if it does qualify, which there is a long road to getting initiative on the ballot in Idaho, then Idahoans would have to pass it by a simple majority. And Brian, this wouldn't be the first time in recent years that we've seen initiative processes. Of course, this past cycle, we saw Idahoans vote to allow Idaho lawmakers to call themselves back.
Is this more of a open primary issue, or is this a ranked choice voting issue?
It's actually, when I talk to people and I kind of look at it myself, it's two separate issues that are kind of pulled into one, because ranked choice voting is something that people have been passionate about. Changing the closed primaries in Idaho is another thing. These are kind of combined.
Because in many areas of the state, your choice is obvious. You don't get a choice on the other side.
Right.
And so those people in the minority kind of feel like they only have to, if they have to choose the lesser of two evils, they got to go jump into that primary.
Yeah.
So all right, we'll see what happens now, because now it goes to the people. All right, thank you very much, Joe. Or it could if they get enough signatures. Idaho Gives, it's Idaho's largest fundraising event of the year. Yep, it is happening right now. And you out there donating all of your money today, you've helped raise a lot of money. You can see it, almost $1.5 million, more than $1.5 million of you have helped raise money for almost 600 organizations, all of them nonprofits. And this is putting that 11-year total we've been doing this well above $20 million. Last year, more than 13,000. Raised more than $3.6 million for 672 nonprofits. You can find a complete list of those nonprofits that are asking for your help this year at idahogives.org, or you can go to ktvb.com and you can donate right now through Thursday. People go missing every day, but some people from certain groups go missing more. One community that gets neglected on a regular basis is Idaho's Indigenous community. And the University of Idaho is trying to change that. It's time to text in your questions, your comments, and your complaints. You do that by sending some clean, concise, and clever messages to the number on your screen, 208-321-5614. Don't forget your name and the hashtag, the 208. Oh, and stick around, because we could share yours at the end of the show. They called it a crisis in Idaho, the number of missing and murdered Indigenous people across the state, the vast majority of which are women, by the way. So the Idaho State Legislature passed House Concurrent Resolution 33, and they did that during the 2020 legislative session. The idea was to raise awareness about the missing and murdered people from the state's 5 tribes, but also to really find out what those numbers look like. Boise State's School of Public Service did their research and released their report a year later, and that report highlighted the reality. Indigenous people are more likely to go missing, like almost twice the average rate. 75% of them are women, and about 63% of Idaho's missing Indigenous persons have been missing for more than a year. Those are startling numbers, but the report also offered solutions. And as Andrew Bartline tells us, U of I students are kind of taking the reins for what Boise State learned in this study, and they're trying to make something happen, do something about it.
Yeah, because there were also some recommendations or solutions that came out of that as well, and that would include expanding education and awareness, really kind of the point of this starting, continuing research related to missing Indigenous people, and also enhancing data collection. Now, a project at the University of Idaho focuses on those 3 points, but at a larger scale. They're on a mission to create an international database dating all the way back to 1980. They want to understand the trends behind these victims and help experts get answers.
It's a database of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit. We're collecting as much information we can about the cases from any kind of databases we can get our hands on to try to get the most comprehensive database. Right now for a learning tool, but hopefully we can be using it for something more than that, more practical, and trying to figure out what the trends are and what exactly is causing this epidemic.
You say this epidemic. Why is something like this needed?
There are so many people in the Indigenous community who go missing or are murdered, and it's not really out there for many people to see. It's just happening, like in the dark, and we need to figure out why.
The regular databases, why is that not sufficient for this group of people?
I think it's because of how erratic the people reporting it is. There's a lot of mistrust in the Indigenous community. A lot of places where they're just told, oh, well, they just ran away, rather than looking into them as a legitimate missing person.
What is the human aspect that makes you so plugged into it?
Well, when I was young, one of my friends growing up, who is Indigenous, his father was murdered. So I just feel like if I have a chance to help, I should do so.
And that stuck with you?
I was young, so it was like one of those things that just stays with you for a while.
What are you learning now? You've said you've gone through like 3,000 cases so far. What is something that's becoming apparent and clear to you?
Out of the cases that I had done, maybe 300 that I found were solved. It's very unfortunate, especially because it's not really seen in the media.
Why do you think that is?
I think that unless you are a traditional, like middle-class white person, you're going to be overlooked. Dr. Hodwitz, who's my mentor, she is in talks with Indigenous community on campus to try to figure out what they would like to do with it, because it's not our story to tell. It's theirs, and we just wanted to hop on there and help, but we ultimately want to give them full reign of what happens with this database.
And right now, this database has gone through 3,000 cases roughly. It was going to go from 1980 to 2020, but it seems that they're interested in pushing that up to 2023. And more students are now getting on board, Brian. The 2 undergrads working on this project, they're seniors, so they're graduating probably a week, right? I mean, that's coming right up. So, I mean, this is going to be a continued process. They're going to continue work on it. It's going to stay, I guess, with that professor at the university. Undergrads are cycling through, continuing to bolster up that database and hopefully answer these questions on what are these trends, what do we need to know, what can we learn?
And some of those questions about why they keep going missing for more than a year, why there's so many that are still missing. A lot of the studies and researches and stories, I should say, in the research that I've seen is because the resources just aren't there when it comes to finding some of these Indigenous people that go missing. You heard about the lack of reporting, but there's also the lack of resources to kind of dig into it a little bit more.
People did
or
that
the willingness to.
People that did that initial report told me on the phone today, resources, big piece of this as well.
All right, thank you very much, Andrew.
One of my favorite stories was a profile on a still photographer named Steve Bly, who's just fantastic, world-renowned. That was one of the first stories that Jennifer and I worked on together. And we have a picture of us standing in the middle of a marsh in our wetsuits trying to stay warm in this swamp water. But it's my favorite picture because that brings back the memory of that day and, you know, to be able to follow around Steve and tell his story.
A couple of weeks ago, we sat down with two former KTVB employees to talk about the origins of Exploring Idaho that you just heard from there. We've been digging into some of these stories, digging into the archives to celebrate KTVB's 70th anniversary, which is coming up in July. We asked Jennifer Eisenhart and Bill Crum what a few of their favorite episodes were over those 6-year run, as you just heard. They told us about the outdoor photographer, Steve Bly. He made the list, and I think you'll probably understand why after you see the whole story.
This is really the best time to be here. It's like you're almost in heaven. I mean, the color here, and the sounds and the birds and so on, it's just wonderful.
A walk through the Camas Prairie at sunrise inspires Steve Bly to great works.
Oh, there's a real pretty Camas right here. Whew. gorgeous. Look at the reds over here now. Look how just vibrant red that is. Reds and greens and yellows. Real pretty shot.
The colors of the Camas Prairie are more than just talk for Steve. He shares these images with the world.
This is really pretty right in here.
As a professional outdoor photographer, Steve captures the beauty of Idaho. His only boss is Mother Nature.
This is really some pretty light if the wind would stop. Takes a lot of patience on flowers. You really have to set it up and get your lens square, and get your tripod right, and get everything just kind of right before you shoot the shot. It really just says Camas and nothing else.
Today, Steve reflects on his start in photography. It was 6 years ago when he quit his desk job with the state and turned what was only a hobby into a full-time job.
It's amazing because I, never was good at drawing or art or anything like that. And it just happened. I thank God for it.
What's happened ever since, the capture of special moments on film. Steve's photographs appear on the covers of magazines, postcards, in brochures, and many have won awards. But for all his travels, Steve says the Camas Prairie remains one of his favorite places, with its purple blooms of camas lilies, red flowers of sourdock, and its majestic backdrop, the Soldier Mountains.
One of the reasons that I enjoy photography so much is that it's afforded me to see the world a lot more and to photograph the world. But the one thing that is very special, that Idaho is still the most beautiful place that I've photographed.
Steve's work takes patience.
I think you'll find that photographers who have a passion for their work will go to about any length to get the right shot, or the shot they feel is really right, as long as it doesn't interfere with the environment or intrude on the wildlife. You might have to wait the whole day for the right picture, but it's worth it. Neat shot.
It's not always the obvious that makes its way into Steve's viewfinder.
You'd be surprised when you turn your back sometimes. If I'm walking out in a scene like this, I'll kind of look through my camera and kind of just start at one end, and I'll just kind of go all around, 360 degrees. And it's surprising the different colors that you get.
And out on the Camas Prairie, you never know what you'll get. Steve Bly says that's the best part.
There's just so many things. There's just reward after reward. From insects to lights to shadow to people to everything. I mean, you just notice things around you, the sky, the colors. I can remember before I had a camera in my hand, I didn't think about those things. And now it's just so wonderful because you really feel and sense and think about everything that's around you all the time. Smell the flowers, as they say. Smell the flowers.
Steve's still out there taking pictures, probably not as prolific as he was back then, but he and his wife Pam live on the banks of the Boise River, and you heard how popular he is. Internationally recognized, that is known by his more than 200 magazines, calendars, and coffee table books, and a whole bunch of awards that he's been given. Needless to say, it's worth quitting his desk job all those years ago. As for the Camas Prairie, yep, it is blooming. You can go and visit that right now. Find a historical marker off of Highway 95, 6 miles south of Grangeville, and you might even get to see the Camas lilies in bloom. All right, let's get to your comments here at the end of the show. First, before we get to that, I understand there are 2 Camas Prairies here in Idaho. We mentioned the one near Grangeville, the story about Steve Bly, that was off of, or near Fairfield, off Highway 20. So not really in bloom at this point, so keep that in mind. Let's get to your comments for today, like this one here. Wow, we may finally get to vote for a candidate rather than a party. Where do I sign up, says Teresa in Meridian. The next one here has to do with basically wanting to know, how do we know if I voted for another party ahead of time? Well, there's supposed to be a crossover voting committee. I asked the GOP about that. Haven't heard anything about it. We'll see you tomorrow.